Welcome to the Get Real Movies podcast. My name is Daniel Chadwick Schubert. I'm your host, and this is episode 9, where we'll be talking about the film The Bikeriders. I am once again joined by my wonderful co-host, Mason, but this episode is sort of special in a way because it's coming right after my trip to Virginia to see him. We actually watched The Bikeriders together and one of the other movies we're going to talk about. So, Mason, I'll bring you in. How are you doing? It's been way too long.
It has been way too long. Hours, days even, since I've seen you, and I long for the presence. But to answer your question, I am doing just fine now that we are once again talking on the show. I can't thank you enough for coming to swing by my side of the non-existent pond, but we were so happy to host you here in the States, and I'm glad that we were able to enjoy our number one shared love of film together in person.
Yes, it was great with the constantly refillable popcorn at Alamo Drafthouse. I was quite impressed with lots of things in America. Another thing is I am drinking right now, and I'm drinking some Vista Bays, which were $12 for $13 at Aldi. So if you're in the States, definitely check out that deal. We are not.
You enjoyed
sponsored.
like a lot of America in a very short amount of time. You had our massive portions with the popcorn, the half-yard beers. I think you had a couple burgers or something, and then you got the Vista Bays. We've got and we just got all the fixins for you, and we showed you around the Capitol all in like the span of a week. I mean, that's more than a lot of Americans do in that amount of time. That's pretty impressive.
I know. I got to see my best American bud, and I got to see a lot of the wonderful state of Virginia, as well as the District of Columbia, because it's not a state; it's a district. Yes, well, it's big enough to, be its own little Vatican in the United States.
It's a good way to put it. But obviously the highlight of your visit was us both going to see The Bikeriders, which we were talking about for months before it happened, which I was excited to see with you.
Yeah, well, I was very excited to see that last year when it was supposed to come out. And then sadly, because of the SAG-AFTRA strikes, it got delayed until this year. And it was a movie that I was quite looking forward to. So I'm glad that it was delayed in the end because we got to watch it together, which we wouldn't have been able to do if it hadn't been delayed. So before we get into that, though, we also watched another movie together, one that you hadn't seen before that we got to scratch off your 100 movies to watch list. And that was All the President's Men. So I guess what I'd want to ask first is some impressions on that. And let's talk about that film a bit, because that was the first movie we watched the week together.
So this is one of Robert Redford's pinnacle pieces in terms of his performances. And I feel it's kind of funny because everything that I see him in is usually politically steered in some way. Like I've seen him in Spy Games. Like I've seen him in All the President's Men. Even in Captain America, he was a political operative, except on kind of the other side that time. And so it's interesting to kind of see the origin of all that, especially when he's all young and handsome and very motivated. Plus him riffing off of Dustin Hoffman. And that's a match made in heaven. They had great chemistry. Love the movie. It's a great take on the brutality of press journalism, especially back then. And I can only imagine how difficult it is now with the advent of the internet and everything. But just seeing the old school ways of how they did things, just like going straight up to people's houses. There were no search engines. There was no Google Maps. You had to write it down. You had to go to library catalogs. It was just a fascinating look of history while also checking out an amazing performance by Redford and Hoffman. So loved it. And I'm glad I was pushed to see it by you.
Yeah, well, I was looking over your list, and it was one of those lists that you scratch off the movie and then reveal the poster. And I just looked at it and I was like, hey, this feels very topical. We're close to D.C. And in a time where journalism is more important than ever. And I love movies that show journalism in a cool way and inspire me. And I know there's lots of journalism students out there who've been inspired by movies that sort of show their craft in such a cool way. This is one of those quintessential films, really. I remember watching this when I was a bit younger and much more interested in politics. I still am interested in politics, but not for a career at least. But it was such an inspiring film because it really looked at, that no one is safe when it comes to the truth. And especially in a world today now where the truth is constantly getting twisted, it's nice to see a movie where journalists were still journalists and searching for the truth. And as much as there was Republicans and Democrats, it didn't really matter what side they were on. They knew what was happening was wrong, and they were just searching for the truth, or at least that's how it was presented. And it felt like that is something that is from like a past time now in today's day and age. But like you said, totally, wonderfully acted. Two great actors at the pinnacle of their careers, Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, and it was much funnier than I remember. Those two playing off each other was quite amusing, and I know you and I laughed quite a bit at that. And then the script by William Goldman, who's one of the legends, one of maybe the Mount Rushmore when it comes to screenwriting and the amount of great screenplays he's done. It was just a really wordy script, and one that there's no real fat on it. It's cut, but it's such a brilliant film, and it goes by so quickly. And I mean, we both stayed awake to watch the film, so we both enjoyed it.
That's right. Yeah, my family fell asleep, but we were consistently like looking at each other, like, "Oh, did you notice that? Did you see that cool part?" And it was weird. It was like looking in a mirror, except a very Canadian mirror. I feel like we missed an opportunity there because we were seeing them walk all over DC in those cream-colored suits. We should have done that when we visited. We should have become the dynamic duo and tried to uncover some hidden truth, but looking really good. I guess the only problem with that is it was 1 billion friggin' degrees in the city at that day. But
yes, I didn't bring my suit also, so next time I just got to bring my suit, I guess.
Yeah. We'll make up for it some other day.
For sure. But yeah, that was really fun to watch. Obviously, after we watched that film later in the week, we went to a preview screening of The Bikeriders, and they had a Q&A with Austin Butler and Jodie Comer afterwards. But I really enjoyed it. I had never been to an Alamo Draft House, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that first. I love the vibe of it. It's a proper film goer cinema, not something that we really have in Canada, except for maybe some of the community cinemas. So it was really a cool experience for me to go there. And then obviously the day before, Ethan showed me around DC, and it was really wonderful kind of seeing all the sights. And it was something that I'd seen years ago, but I really got to kind of take in the city. And like you mentioned, there's so many great films around that have been filmed around there, and we were constantly quoting them. One of the big ones was The Winter Soldier. On your left, we kept quoting that as we walked around the monument area, the Washington Monument.
And I showed you the seedy underbelly of the city as well. Like I showed you the clean parts, and then I showed you like the bars and where everybody else hung out. That's not in the movies, so you got to see both sides of it.
I did. But yeah, we ended up at the Alamo Draft House to watch The Bikeriders, one that I had been anticipating for quite a while. But I'll let you kind of lead off. What were some of your initial thoughts on the film, maybe going in, then coming out, and kind of how did you view it? And yeah, what were some of your thoughts?
So going into it, I didn't have a whole lot of expectations. So Jeff Nichols is relatively, I'd say, still kind of a smaller name in the Hollywood scene. Like he's got a filmography, an extensive one, and even an achieved one, but he's not a massively recognizable name, I would argue. He's very famous for working closely with Michael Shannon a lot of the times, and so we moved on from there. My personal favorite of his is Mud, but that was years and years ago it came out. So all I knew about this movie was that it was about bike riders, from the title, obviously, and that this was going to be front and center Austin Butler's movie. And then we get into the movie, and that's not it at all. I realized I had been hoodwinked by another marketing ploy, much like Monkey Man, where Austin Butler's there, and for the record, Austin Butler is a good actor. He's not just Elvis. He did great in Dune 2. He's been great in The Bikeriders, but he's just kind of sitting there looking handsome. This is Jodie Comer and Tom Hardy's movie. And they do a great job for what it is. It's a tale of a true story, a very compelling true story about a bunch of Midwestern bikers who want something more out of life, and that's completely relatable. Well shot, well acted, score is great. It's just, again, sold to you as something else because they were, I guess, trying to ride on the new hotness of Austin Butler, which anybody going into it for that is going to be kind of disappointed. Like, he sits there looking hot. That's about all that's about all that you're given. So for some people, that'll be enough. For me, altogether, great film. Another good coming from Jeff Nichols, and I'm looking forward to what he does in the future. But just hopefully I know exactly what he's doing versus being had by his PR team next time.
Yeah, and I think that marketing is a big part of films, but I don't particularly like when they make you think a film is completely different. I do agree with you. Arson Butler is the face of this movie. I came out of the movie thinking, hey, I might want to copy that beard because it looks pretty solid. But I totally agree. This is Jodie Comer's film and Tom Hardy as well. Tom Hardy is never really someone who lets you down when it comes to acting. He's had a few movies maybe that weren't amazing, but he's never not been amazing in a film, if you know what I'm saying. I love what he does with his mannerisms, with his accents. He loves testing new things out, and he's the perfect guy to really get on the screen as this burly, tough leader of a motorcycle gang. And I think that what I did like about this movie is I really didn't know what it was once I got in. The trailers didn't give that much away, which I always like. I hate when trailers give away too much. And like you said, I thought this was going to just be Austin Butler's story, but it really, when you get down to the meat of it, it was Jodie Comer's story and all about her relationship with Benny, Austin Butler's character, but also all the other bikers and how their lives kind of intertwined. So I think the acting was fantastic, especially Jodie Comer. I'm a big lover of her because she's a girl from Liverpool who does better accents than I ever could, and I like putting on the accents myself. But she just really gets into that Midwest wife of a dangerous bike rider, and she really gets into that role and grabs it with two hands and doesn't really let go, and she's very believable as it. And obviously it's a really fascinating story that I didn't know about, and especially at the end when you see all the real people and all the real photos that this photographer took, you kind of realize that this is a real human story from the Midwest, and not something you realize happened, I guess. And obviously nowadays we've seen our fair share of we've seen our fair share of bike rider films where there's gangs and things like that, but we've never really seen the origin of it and the human side of it. It's usually, oh, these guys are terrible guys and they run guns and drugs and things like that. But once you kind of go back in time a bit, you realize that a lot of it was about camaraderie and about feeling a part of something and sort of these lost souls getting together and finding a purpose in life. So
right, like a lot of these guys are just dorks. Like it turns out, when you first start out, these are just guys that are kind of bored of the home life and want to do something more. So they're like, hey, let's dress up in cool leather jackets and go ride bikes with my buddies. I mean, they all just start out as kind of the old Midwestern version of nerds. Like they just want to do something fun with their guy friends. And then it grows and mutates and new people come in, and then that's when it starts to snowball into something a lot more unpredictable, something more recognizable to like a Hell's Angels or Sons of Anarchy.
No, I really agree with that because I felt like this was very much at the start of the film a very innocent way of boys being boys. You know, they wanted to join a club, they wanted to get together and be nerds together and just ride around the town with their bikes. And then obviously as the clubs grow across the country and things start getting a little messier, it turns into something a little bit more toxic. But they really kind of show that progression quite naturally. And then obviously Tom Hardy and Michael Shannon and Austin Butler and Emery Cohen and all these great actors.
Norman Reedus too.
Yeah, Norman Reedus, who shows up kind of out of nowhere, and I didn't expect it at all. But they sort of encompass these bike riders really perfectly and present this sort of natural progression from bike enthusiasts to criminals, sadly. And I think Jeff Nichols, someone who I love too. Mud was a great film. I was a big fan of Loving as well when he made that, and he hasn't done much since. And I was really excited for whatever he did next. And when I saw this was his next one, I was quite stoked, and that's why I was so excited over all these months and I guess almost a year now when it was first announced. But I was really impressed and I enjoyed myself a lot. I also think the movie-going experience really helped that as well, because sitting next to you in a really cool movie theater with a Q&A afterwards, that kind of adds to the movie experience. So I feel like I maybe need to see it one more time to get my perfect rating on it, but I really enjoyed it as well.
I think that the movie experience, no matter what movie you're seeing, will always elevate the experience. Like there's an unspoken thing that will just elevate it beyond your living room. And so I completely agree. Like seeing it in the theater was so much more fun, especially in the Alamo, like Sony's new crown jewel. The Alamo is always a great time. And I love how they like actively enforce the whole don't be a dick in the theater kind of thing, which other theaters say they will do, and then they only just kind of stand there. I think I've seen maybe twice in my life where like the movie theater employees actually did something. You know, God bless those underpaid people, like teenagers usually, who did that. But the Alamo actually comes down on that hard, and I love them for that. No, Bikeriders, excellent film, great actors, really compelling story, just a very, very human story. Like nothing about it I think will really surprise anyone. Like everybody sees the writing on the wall when this starts. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth the watch. You were bringing up Jodie Comer earlier. So I am only familiar with her really from Killing Eve and that one really bizarre part in Rise of Skywalker where that made no sense. She does a fantastic job here playing the Midwestern gal perfectly with the accent and the mannerisms, just excellently encapsulates that. You know, Tom Hardy, like you said, does great accent work. His physicality of it is very understated but great. Got a Mike Face coming hot off his Challengers role. Not hanging out with Zendaya, but still looking like a pretty picture. And you know, everybody gets along well. So I feel like this is a movie where it's just everybody was having a good time, and you can kind of get that just from the chemistry and the overall feel of the movie. So I'm glad I went. I'm glad we went. I'm glad we went together.
Yeah, you could almost say it was worth the ride.
Boo. Boo, I say.
Yes, boo. I know. I apologize for that pun. But I quite enjoyed it. It was one that I love seeing in the theaters. I would say that I would recommend people see it in the theaters as well, just because I enjoyed it so much and I enjoyed seeing it with you in the theaters as much. Obviously, as we go a little bit in the future and I see this film again, maybe my rating will change. But for now, I think this is definitely one worth checking out. And I really enjoyed it. So I will give you your time to rate. And from your mannerisms, I'm thinking you're not in agreement with me, but that's okay.
See, you're cheating because our listeners can't see my mannerisms, but you can. Yeah, if you have a long lost Canadian friend who's coming from across country lines and the one thing he wants to do is see this movie in theaters in the nation's capital, then go see it in a theater. Have a good time. Otherwise, save the $40 and pop some popcorn at home, pop this one in, grab a beer, and have a good time. It's a good, fun film. I don't think it merits alone the theater experience, even though I just said how a theater experience elevates anything. I think that needs to be saved for like the heavy hitters these days with the prices and how everything is going right now. So I'm going to still give this a rent it at home or wait for it on streaming grade. But that doesn't take away anything from what I said earlier about that. I really enjoyed it. I really think it's worth a watch. It's just, wait for it to be on sale.
Okay. All right. I respect it. I will respectfully disagree for now, but if I am wrong in the future, when I've rewatched it, I will gladly tell you that in a whispered voice, and you might not hear me.
Okay. Well, I look forward to you whispering in my ear the sweet nothings of your movie opinions.
Yeah, but Mason, I really enjoyed watching the film with you. And before I let us go, I guess, I wanted to ask you, what was one of the highlights, it can be movie related or not, of our little visit to the last week?
One of the highlights of our visit, I think, is when we spent like 10 hours walking in the blazing hot heat wave of DC. And then we were all sweaty and disgusting. We get home. It's like 1 a.m. I'm getting ready for bed and everything. I'm exhausted. And you text me and be like, hey, do you want to play video games? And I was like, I am dead tired. Everything in my body is screaming to just like faint on the floor right now. But I was like, no. This is the Bikeriders would have gone down and played video games. The Bikeriders would have pushed forward for their friend, and that's what we did. And we had a great time. We stayed up way too late playing awesome games, and I had a wonderful wonderful experience. So that was my favorite part of your trip, is just getting the time to spend with you and enjoying our love of movies and games together. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful having you here.
Well, I will tune in with that. I say my favorite memory of our trip was playing games with you, but not the video game variety, the board game variety, or the card game variety. I was learning how to play DC deck building, and I learned quite a bit from Mason and his family. Also that they are very competitive and not ones to be messed with.
The main thing you learned is that whenever you play a board game with me and my wife will always win. And you and I will just look at each other wondering what the hell happened for the past hour, where we both thought that we would be in a good spot. But exactly. No, that was a great game. I'm glad you were able to pick it up and have fun.
Well, Mason, I enjoyed it immensely visiting with you. I enjoyed it immensely watching this film with you and watching quite a few other ones as well, and gaming and everything else we did. This was a rather special episode. I'm sorry we didn't get to record it together, but obviously I had to leave the next day quite early. And thank you very much for having me. So this was sort of live podcast, because we got to watch the movie together. Closer than usual, exactly. And I'm hoping we can record quite a few live podcasts in the future. But I'll let you sign us off, as always, as you always do when we record together. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Daniel. And if you, our wonderful listeners, felt like the marketing for this show also misled you into thinking Daniel would be the main speaker, then make sure to leave us a subscribe. Maybe follow us on the other channels as well, Spotify, Pandora, iHeart. We're on all the good stuff. But also, there may be a special surprise coming to our Spotify channel soon, so definitely keep a close eye on that. Look at the social channels as well. Daniel might be posting a special little tidbit from his visit here in the States. But until next time, I've been Mason.
I've been Daniel.
And we'll see you at the movies. Bye, y'all.